السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So in lesson 9, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh first reminds us that in the previous lesson we said that all parts of this abode of existence, the parts are all connected. Now, the type of this connection, the type of this dependency, we have yet to discover, and inshallah we'll come to that soon. Then he continues from lesson 8 with a few other examples. He says, look at the orange seed, for example, which is placed in soil, and how its roots go downwards, its stem grows upwards, it moves or grows towards light, and over time it evolves into a tree, branches, leaves, and ultimately fruit. What is it in this seed that enabled it to develop through all these different stages? And then when it develops, then it produces more and more seeds, leading to thousands and thousands of oranges, and so on and so forth. There must be something here. And it always gives the same product. The product is always the same. With the orange seed, it leads to oranges. The same odor. The order of how it progresses, it's always the same. There's a harmony. It never rebels against its duty to reach its objective. The seed to the fruit, it's just like a program. It's going, it's progressing, evolving, and it doesn't go against its duty. Yes, sometimes there may be environmental outside forces which inhibit the seed growing. But in general, if everything is prepared outside the climate parameters, it won't rebel, it won't be disobedient against its duty to become an orange. Now this submission or obedience of journeying along the way and become its perfection, which is an orange, it's not an accidental thing. You can see order, it's all happening in stages, there's a logic behind it. And if it was accidental, okay, now you would see some disorder, but you see every time, every seed, it's going along this route of perfection. It never becomes, for example, an apple. It always becomes an orange. All this, when you look at it, this, in quotes, submission or obedience of journeying along the way until one becomes the objective or one's perfection, like an orange, that we give it a name. And the name is deen. Obedience in journeying towards one's objective, that's the meaning of deen. Now, this submission and obedience of journeying along the way to one's objective, he raises this question: does it lie with humans too? We are also moving from the embryo onwards, and then once we're born, we continue, we keep on continuing. So this deen, with this meaning, applies to humans too. One difference, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says, there's one difference here. Well, with the seed, it never rebels against its duty. But humans, yes, they do rebel against their duty. Now, why is that? What do they have that enables that? Otherwise, an orange seed never becomes an apple. It can't. It can't rebel against this obedience of journeying towards its objective. So the seeds are Yes, so here he ends. In this lesson 9, he ends here. This lesson 9 reminded me of something which Shahid Mutahhari has written in his book of Tawheed. And this is a very subtle point, and it's linked with this. So with your permission, I'm adding this. It's not in the book. The content is the same, but the terminology is a bit different. The approach is a bit different. We say that seeds are moving towards something. Embryos are moving towards something. This movement, we want to just open this movement a bit more. You imagine a car. For example, they've made a car. That car, if you steer its wheel left, it'll go left. If you steer it right, it'll go right. So you've made the car. Now this going left and going right, did it emanate from making the car? Because whatever you do, you, for example, turn the switch, it goes on. This going on, switching it on. This turning left and right, depending on how you steer the wheel. These movements, how do you classify them? Do they emanate directly from the creation of the car, the production of the car, or not? Or for example, when you make a watch, all its parts you assemble, and then you see it's ticking and it keeps on continuing. This continuous ticking of the clock, does it emanate from the creation of the clock? Because it's moving, it's some kind of movement here. So look, we have movement of an orange seed, movement of an embryo, movement of a car, movement of a watch. Is the movement of a car like the movement of an orange seed, or is the movement of an orange seed like that of the car, in this sense, that in the same way the car, once you've made it, everything now emanates from the creation of the car. It depends how you made it. Is the seed like that? You've created the seed. Every movement which follows now in this seed is a direct product of the constitution of the seed. It's something to think about here. Or is the embryo, everything which happens with the movement of the embryo as it progresses, it's all as a result of that initial embryo is made, everything now continues from that creation. This is a very subtle point, and Shahid Mutahhari even says, he says, I haven't seen anyone mention this. That's a very big claim. He was teaching Tawheed at the beginning of the revolution to medical students, engineers, and now it's a book. It's a book. And I always tell even seminary students in Rome, for aqa'id, read Shahid Mutahhari's Tawheed, Nubuwwah and Ma'ad. That's sufficient. Today people are studying in the Hosea maybe for 10 years. They've only read one aqa'id book, at most two, but they still haven't grasped the essence of Tawheed, the essence of Ma'ad, and so on and so forth. These three are very good books. Anyway, so Shahid Mutahhari says, no, all these scholars, all these centuries, they haven't differentiated something. We have, when they want to prove Allah, one proof that they use is the argument for design. The cosmos has design. Every design has a designer, so the cosmos has a designer. Although that doesn't prove Allah, it proves that the cosmos has a designer. Now, is it one or two? Is that designer eternal, non-eternal? These things you have to prove separately. But with this, with that design and everything which follows the design, of any created thing in the cosmos. That which follows, they also trace it back to this argument, the argument for design. Whereas Shaykh Muttari says, and he says, I've only seen it by one scholar, Fakhr Razi, one of the earliest scholars, and he said he mentioned it, and he got it from the Quran, where when the Quran says, قَالَ رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْتَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى, where our Lord is He who granted everything its creation and then guided it. Look, so we have something's created, designed, made, then Allah guides it. Although we're not supposed to bring verse of the Quran yet, and that's not, we're trying to just go with aqli argumentation for now. But that, I just wanted to give that piece of history of Fakhr Razi. He got the idea from the Quran, not that he, through his aql, came to this understanding. It's a question of guidance. That seed is created, then it moves towards its objective. The car and the watch example is created, produced, made, and we see movement also. These are two movements. Are they the same or not? Or like today, for example, with artificial intelligence, with robots, they are made and then they move. They speak, they do many things, like the car, like the watch. This movement that the seed undergoes after being created, is it the same movement as the robot or the car? i.e., the movement is a result of what the constitution of the making is a product of the created thing. The movement follows that. This is good to bear in mind, because in these discussions, Ayatollah Hassan Zari is going to touch upon it, but he goes the Irfani route. Shaykh Mutahari went the philosophical route, which I'm explaining now. Which of these movements, movement of the seed, movement of the embryo, watch, car, robot, which one qualifies as guidance, which one doesn't qualify as guidance? So, when the seed is moving, is it being guided towards something? Well, we say it seems to be the case with the embryo too. But what about with the car or the watch or the robot? That's certainly moving too. Does that qualify as guiding though? Is the car, when it goes to the left, when it goes to the right, or the robot when it speaks or runs, depending on what's happening around it, is it being guided? Does guidance qualify, or is it something compulsory, compelled, something not voluntary? It was programmed. These two have to be differentiated. But the thing is, the Quran says that Allah a'ta kulla shay, everything we made, thumma hada, and we guided it. It says everything. A robot, is it a thing or not? It is, yes. It qualifies, this is a thing. Yes. Here, although I'll explain the answer now, although I would rather wait, but I'll just point to the answer and then for you to think about. Remember, we said stones move. We said plants move, and they move towards an objective. Humans, animals, they're all moving, even stones. these primary materials that we have, it entailed a movement from earth to whatever. And here, once it reaches its perfection, right, once it becomes a stone of any type, copper or silver, gold, whatever, it reaches its perfection, it reaches its end. Movement doesn't qualify anymore. When you've reached your perfection, that's the end. With the plant too, when it's reached its perfection of giving fruit, at one time onwards, it goes towards decay. Now when that decays, it doesn't matter. But there's one time they reach its perfection, then you see the plant dying, the tree dying. And then the next season, it grows again, and so on and so forth. Once something reaches its perfection, movement doesn't have any meaning. We said that the reason something moves because it is in need of something. There's a deficiency it has. It's moving to fill that deficiency with perfection. And then it keeps on growing. And there's still deficiency. It keeps on going forward. With stones and plants, you see them reaching their perfection, and that's the end of that. It's now a stone. It remains a stone. It doesn't grow further. And at one time, it may even start to rot or decay. It may be years and years. It doesn't matter. With plants too, the same story. So here, a robot, a watch, and a car, is it a thing, or is it many things that then man has compiled? You see? It's the latter. Man has compiled them. When you separate the parts of the car, the watch, the robot, you trace it back to primary elements, which was earth and reaches perfection. Now, then you compile something. That, whatever movement comes from that, that's compulsory. Guidance doesn't qualify there. It's forcible. It's automatic. Whereas with the seed, with the plant, with the embryo, no. It's a different story. It's not a case of it reaching its perfection, then you assemble the parts together. The seed is growing until it reaches its perfection, then it becomes something else. So there's a difference between producing or creating and then guidance. These are two separate things. With the seed, guidance qualifies. With the embryo, it qualifies. With the robot, it doesn't. The robot may be able to do everything me and you do. The robot may even smile. But at the end, it's all programmed. It's programmed to 0 and 1s, computer programming. If you tell the robot that, are you aware of yourself? Look, they can't have that awareness. Although I don't want to go a bit too fast, we have to go gradually. Okay, so that was one point which I wanted just for you to appreciate. There's a difference between the different movements we see in different things. Some qualify as there's a force of guidance making them move, they're being guided. Others no. And it seems those where guidance qualifies, there's an objective to which that guidance is pushing them to. But with the car, with the watch, first of all, there are a number of things assembled. They've reached their objective already. There's no succeeding objective pushing that watch anymore. It's all automatic actions. Whereas with the seed, there's something succeeding it, which is attracting it. So their guidance qualifies. With the watch and the car, guidance doesn't qualify. Inshallah, I was able to convey the point, but if not, we can then have Q&A after the next session. So that was lesson 9, and I added something by Shaykh Mutahari. I thought maybe it would be useful. In lesson 10, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh now comes and says, okay, let's take a breather and let's give a summary. We've gone through 9 lessons. He says, okay, let's now compile a collection of principles now. Our ustad in this way was only our aql, our fitrah. It was all propositions which came from, our thinking. We didn't use a verse of the Quran, we didn't use a book, we used the inner prophet within us. He said, okay, we've talked a lot, let's now formulate them into a number of principles. So in lesson 10, he gives these principles, he just lays them out. So just as a reminder, we'll go through them. He says, number 1, whatever is existence, and non-existence is not real. Number 2, whatever arises, whatever manifests, has to arise from existence. Nothing can arise from non-existence. Number 3, we have a power with which we judge, analyze, and compare. If you remember in lesson number 1 and 2, that was discussed. The 4th principle, the abode of existence is not reality-less, when answering the sophists. Number 5, the truth and reality of any given thing is existence. There again, he's answering the sophists. Number 6, there's no intermediary between existence and non-existence. That's in answer to the Haliya group of people. Number 7, all existing things are interdependent on one another, not dissociated from one another. Principle number 8, with respect to that which moves uniformly at all times towards a goal, its movement is not futile or accidental. And number 9, that which moves towards a goal, it's not accidental, therefore it's following a set protocol. And that set protocol, be it of a plant, a seed, or whatever, it gave a name called deen, that obeying, that journeying towards an objective. So that's it, that's lesson 10. He only went through summarizing what we've gone through so far in those 9 lessons. He just formulated them for simplicity's sake. And this continues. Every few sessions, he gives he brings them into a principle layout. Okay, so that's lesson 9 and 10. If we have any questions, we can go through them, and then we'll do 11 and 12, inshallah. Yes. Although if you want, I can, it was decided to go 2 by 2, but if you want, I can continue, but yes. Yes. Okay, yes, yes. Assalamu alaikum.
So for the things that require guidance and that don't require guidance,
Yes.
based on what you just said, can you categorize as non-living things and living things?
See, yes and no. It depends what you mean by non-living things. If non-living is a stone, if you call a stone a non-living thing, the answer to your question is no. Because that stone undergoes the movement from earth to gold. Okay, it takes millions of years, but there's movement. But the movement of a stone from earth to copper, to earth to gold, there's movement. That's different to the movement of a car. So it can't be that. But if you mean by non-living like a car, or a watch, or a chair, which is comprised of many primary materials which have reached their perfection and now it's compiled, yes, there you're right. Guidance won't qualify there. Yes. But we still have a lot to go to get to the bottom of this. Yes. Right now I just wanted you to appreciate this difference of movement. Okay. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. In lesson number 11, he says that in the previous sessions we were discussing movement, and we said that all things, when we look at our surroundings in nature, all things seem to be moving. Stones, plants, animals. Look in the planets, everything is moving. Even atoms, inside the atoms. And we said, it's moving, therefore it's in need of something. There's a deficiency it has. And because of this deficiency it has, it's evolving, it's moving to perfection, to acquire something which it doesn't have. And the two common examples was the seed to the orange and the embryo to humans. Now, if something is moving, with these examples that we've given, it's definitely moving with respect to something. And it's moving to acquire something that it doesn't have. When it's moving, it doesn't have something, it's moving to acquire this thing which it doesn't have. When it acquires it, it reaches its perfection. Now, it may end there, or it may then continue that's that level. Now, I'm still deficient in something else now. And then something else, and it may continue. With a plant, eventually, when it reaches its perfection, eventually, the plant may start to decay. Its plant identity ends with its perfection. And then from now on, it's another entity now, which converts to rotting and decay and all this thing. You can't say it's the same plant. The identity changes, because after perfection, when there's no room for perfection and something, whatever it is, reaches its perfection, movement has no meaning. So if you say, well, this plant is still moving because it's decaying, you say, no, that's not the plant anymore, it's a new entity. That plant stopped at its perfection. This is something else now going towards its perfection. So on reaching its goal, it reaches its perfection. Now, moving has no meaning once something has reached its objective. Why? Because the need factor has gone. And once it reaches that ultimate perfection, it doesn't have any need anymore. It's game over for it. It reaches perfection. So here perfection exists. There is no need for further movement, and therefore movement is not conceivable. Now, any moving thing existent is moving to become another thing. This seed, imagine the seed, until it gives the fruit, phase by phase, it's always becoming something else in this movement. It's always becoming a more perfect existent, depending on the phase it is. So it's approaching to become another. And if it stops moving, that means to you that it's reaches perfection. And it's reached its goal, it's reached its objective. Although with the seed or embryo example, we're assuming there's no outside interference, otherwise that can also stop it. We're just taking the natural course of things. Now, here, whenever there's movement, we said it's associated, therefore, with a deficiency. Once perfection, the ultimate perfection has been attained to, there is no deficiency anymore. With every existent, its perfection is different. Okay, they have differing levels of perfection, and it depends on what it is, a stone, plant, animal. But on reaching that perfection, then there's no deficiency anymore. When there's no deficiency, there's no movement. Doesn't move anymore. Now in lesson 1, if you remember, we discussed that which is the criterion to make something more noble or of more value than another. Remember we started with plants and stones, then plants, animals, humans, between humans. What the ultimate criterion we said, which was the differentiating factor which makes something more noble or more value over there, was knowledge, if you recall. Here then Ayatollah Hassan Saleh says, a learner, someone who's learning something. They learn, and this learning, they're moving as they are learning something. And in the process, they're moving, and as he's learning, he's becoming more perfect, or he's becoming less deficient. And then they still feel a deficiency to learn more. So when they're in primary school, year 1, year 2, year 3, then they still feel deficient. Then they go to year 4, they want to more. Then PhD. Now some people may then stop, but some people, that deficiency they may feel within themselves. They continue moving. So this applies with humans and learning. They're moving in the process. And all that is learned, that which they are acquiring and compensating their deficiency, is knowledge. They had a deficiency in knowledge, they're filling it, they're compensating. Then they want more, they feel another deficiency. So they're moving in the process. Now this knowledge, is it existing or not? It's not non-existence, otherwise they wouldn't go towards it in the first place. Non-existence, you can't say I'm acquiring non-existence. One can't move towards non-existence was impossible. This knowledge is existence. You're moving towards it. You have a deficiency, you're moving to acquire it. And this process continues. And if one was to say, I don't want knowledge anymore, here, this would be an illness. Because what they're saying is, I've reached my perfection. Now, here, this was something which, knowledge, can there ever be an end to it? You suddenly stopped somewhere. You said, I don't want knowledge anymore. Now here, he just gives this example, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh. We haven't even touched upon what is knowledge, okay? But this example just quickly passes through it. He wants to play with our minds a bit, wants us to have the examples, but in 10 lessons from now, in the future, then he enters the whole story of knowledge. But the statement is important. He says, because knowledge itself is limitless, but I shouldn't be saying that right now. But the example, he says that if something is limitless and then you suddenly say, I don't want it anymore, there's a problem with you. Because if everything was normal, you would have kept on continuing. You would never have said, I stop here, I don't want knowledge. He says this is an illness. Okay. Now, and finally in this lesson, number 11, he says if we have an existing thing that has all the maximum perfections, whatever you can conceive perfection-wise, this X, imagine, has everything. Here, this X is movement conceivable in relation to it. The answer is no. Your definition of X was, it has all the perfections, absolute perfection. So when something has absolute perfection, what deficiency does it have? To want to move. So if we come up with an existing thing which has all the perfections, here movement has no meaning. So if we were to say pure existence, all of existence, therefore, is static and does not move, that's not an inaccurate statement. It's correct. Pure existence, not existence in a particular shape or form. Okay? That absolute existence from which everything emanates from and nothing can be existence free, that if we call that a static being or a being that does not move, that's not incorrect because it has everything. We said movement is a function of need. Wherever there's need, then it moves forward. But when there's no need, movement has no meaning. Where does it move to? Such an entity, when it has all the perfections, where does it move to? So lesson 11 finishes, and at the end he says, based on this lesson, allow me to give 3 extra principles that we've concluded. Number 10, knowledge is existence. Number 11, see, when he says knowledge is existence, he wants to pave the way for something. And he gave the learner example. The learner, by learning knowledge, is moving. And we said that whatever moves, it's moving towards something. Now he says, number 10, knowledge is existence. But he hasn't opened up what knowledge, the stuff is. Number 11, movement qualifies with respect to things that lack perfection. And number 12, if X existing thing is absolute perfection, movement in relation to that is inconceivable. So that's lesson number 11. And with your permission, we'll just number in lesson 12 and we'll finish inshallah. In lesson number 12, he says, okay, so we have said when X thing moves, it does so because of a need, it has a deficiency, and it wants to be perfected. Now, some existing things, like an orange, for example, is the perfect form or objective or goal of other existing things, like a seed. They're both existing. But the orange is also existing, the seed too. But the orange is a more perfect form or goal. It's a goal of the seed. If it's a goal of something, it's more perfect. Its existence is more developed, is less deficient. And therefore, some existing things are more perfect and have a higher degree than others when you compare them. So, if something moves from A to B, becoming more perfect, you can appreciate that some existing things are of more value than some existing things. Now, some things that are limited to what we perceive in the external world, in the sensible, things which are sensible, we appreciate that some things are more precious than other things. But some things we may not be able to see. For example, knowledge again. We're going towards it and we want to acquire it. That's existence. The deficient learner is an existing thing too. And he wants to be perfected through knowledge. Here too, we realize that knowledge is more perfect than a lack of it. So here for now, irrespective of whether something is material or immaterial, the very fact that some existing things are more perfect than others, we can establish, because we see this, its goal and objective is that. A, its objective is B. And A is existing, B is existing, but that's more developed, it's more perfect. So, between different existing things, some are more perfect than others, some are less deficient than others, and those which are more perfect, right now we can say their essence, their substance, their reality is of more value than those that are less perfect. In any case, when we look at these different things and evaluate in such a way, this sequence of degrees of perfection must end or be traced back to something which is the ultimate goal, the perfection of perfections, the goal of goals, the end of ends. It has to end somewhere, because otherwise, if it doesn't end with the perfection of perfections, then it will still move. It will still move because it's deficient in something. So it has all these different existing things which are moving, and we've appreciated they vary in their value. Some are more perfect than others, but ultimately they all have to be traced back to the perfection of perfections. Or the objective of all of them has to be the perfection of perfections. Something which no longer needs to move. That's the second point he mentions here. And then in relation to this, such an existing thing, which is the perfection of perfections, here, none of those existing things can reach it, and be it. Because if something can reach that perfection of perfections, if it becomes it, then you have two. If you have two, need automatically crops up again, because there are two of them. So there's something he is occupying or has that the other doesn't, at least spatio-temporally, for example. So they can never reach the perfection of perfections. And all these existing things, they're in need of that perfection of perfections. They're all deficient with respect to it. Now, the seed is moving towards the perfection of perfections. How much can it attain to, perfection-wise? It has a limit. Plants can reach that perfection of perfections based on their limit. Animals based on their limit. Humans based on their limit. But this perfection of perfections, that's not needy of anything. Now a question arises here. After giving those three general points, he says, concerning any given entity that is moving towards perfection, who or what is moving it, or, in quotes, guiding it to perfection? That's an important question. Look, he's going slowly. Okay, he's going very slowly. But these are very important questions now. Up to now, everything was an aqli exercise. And until the very end, it's all aqli. Look, we've acknowledged all this only through the inner prophet. But now, okay, we've discussed movement to some degree, that they're in need, that there's a deficiency, it's going towards perfection, there's an objective. But who is moving it towards perfection? And here he says that to get an answer to this, we have to go through a number of preliminaries. Now, from lesson 13, he starts these preliminaries. From lesson 13 to 17, he's saying the same thing but in different ways. Inshallah, we'll cover this in the next session. But just one thing I want to just to simplify or add something. If you imagine a seed and it becoming a plant, then a tree, then the tree giving oranges. So the seed is A, the plant stage is B, the tree stage is C, and the giving of oranges, which is the ultimate goal, that is D. So this seed, at any given stage, in and of itself, okay, so when you look at the seed only as a seed in stage A, is it perfect in and of itself? Or is it complete in and of itself? Maybe perfect is too early to use this word. But when you look at the seed in and of itself, at a given stage, at a given point, is it complete? The answer is yes. Yes, well done. Because you're only looking at it at that point. At that, yes, it's perfect. In and of itself, without looking at anything else, it's perfect, it's complete. But when that seed in stage A, you compare it to a succeeding stage, like a plant or the tree, the seed now, you say, is incomplete. It's imperfect. You even say it is in need. You say it has a deficiency. He gives this as an example. From lesson 13 to 17, he's going to play with our minds a bit. And it's all based on this one example he gave. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin. Yes, yes.
So you mentioned about, for example, the example of Robert or car.
Yes.
And they are already at its perfect state, and there's no guidance.
Perfection. Yes, yes.
Yeah, but what about the atoms which are within that item?
Yes, yes.
They are moving, like the electrons or within that.
Yes, yes.
How would you?
Yes, well, like that, we separated it into primary materials like metal or plastics or those kind of things. What you've done now, let's say a chair is made up of 4 or 5 primary materials. Yes, those primary materials, they reach an end. Now what you've done is now you've added a few million, billion separate atoms now. Yes, they may keep on going, okay, but the metal, it grows, it reaches its metal identity, and therefore it stops there. It's always a metal now. And when it starts to rot or what do they call that? Rust. Yes. And you want to galvanize and everything. Then it's decaying. It becomes something else. But as it's a metal, it's reached its perfect state. The metal identity doesn't alter anymore. Now here, how it's related to atoms, because if the atoms were to change that metal into something else, it would have changed, but it didn't. But the metal ends. It doesn't become anything more perfect. There's an end limit there. The plastic, it ends. All the different parts of a given thing, it has an end. It reaches objective. You've just now, man has come and compiled it into something. Okay? So now it's a number of things which have reached their perfection. You've compiled. Any movement which comes from that is automatic. Why? Because they've reached their perfection. If one of them hadn't reached their perfection, that particular movement, you would say it's still being guided. Yes. Pardon?
If it is not coming to perfection,
Yes.
it means there is a deficiency.
If it's not going to perfection,
Let's say if atoms contained and selected, manufacturer has manufactured one plastic chair.
yes, yes,
But due to certain things, it has not been come to perfection.
yes.
It means there is a deficiency and it has not become a chair the way he wanted.
Right. Yes, but that's man-made. The point he's making is with atoms,
Atoms,
it's still moving.
right.
What he's done is now he's added these atoms, or millions and millions of them. So let's say if it's a hydrogen atom, or it's a helium atom, or sodium atom, whatever. Yes, now we have, these atoms have reached their perfection. Thank you very much. The atoms have reached, because it doesn't change from hydrogen to helium. But now what you've done is you've added billions extra to our component. Usually we don't look at the atoms, in the story. Yes, yes.
Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
You know how you just put out the 4 stages right now? Like,
Yes.
for example,
Yes.
a seed going to a plant to become a tree to become a fruit again.
Yes, yes.
So, a seed could also go the other way. A seed, instead of growing into a plant, could rot and die. And
Yes, we said we're assuming there's no outside interferences. Yes, there are no outside interferences. Yes, without the natural course of it.
yes, so even if the seed, instead of growing into a plant, dying, is also going towards perfection, or no?
Well, if it stops at the plant stage, here, or you say, well, usually it continues unless there's an outer interference. But let's say it stopped at the plant stage. At that stage, in and of itself, it's perfect. But you can say it had the potential to be more perfect, but it was interrupted. But once it starts decaying, it's another reality now.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, if it starts decaying before it becomes a plant, the seed is supposed to become a plant.
Yes, yes.
Instead, a seed, before becoming a plant, it just rots and just decays.
Decays, right? It didn't reach its...
Also a form of perfection, or is that?
Yeah, in and of itself at that stage, but it still didn't reach the plant, so it didn't reach its potential. When you look at it compared to the plant, you say it didn't reach its potential. When you look at it itself at the seed stage, yes, there it was complete. Yes. There's a question here. Could you please define deen in a sentence? Is this applicable only to living beings? So it's applicable to whatever qualifies as guidance. And the definition was submitting or obedience in journeying towards an objective. Okay? Now this applies to seeds, applies to embryos. It doesn't apply to the car or the watch or the robot, but it applies to humans too. That journeying of obedience, that code, that we call deen. So is it applicable only to living beings? It depends what you mean by living beings. Yes. It applies to stones even too, yes. So when they say the deen of Islam is the fitrah, it's because the fitrah's journey has to be actualized. When they say the deen is the deen of the fitrah, is that, yes. Yeah, that's okay.
So when the embryo in the stages again, when it starts as an embryo and eventually the human being is born.
Yes.
So in and of itself, at that point, it's already perfect.
At which stage?
When it's just born.
When it's just
The
born?
fetus,
Yes.
in and
Yes.
of
It's
itself,
perfect.
it's
Yes.
But again, in relation to where it's supposed to get to.
Yes. Yes. You
still has to
you
make-
say deficiency.
There's a deficiency.
Yes.
So now there's a physical, I
Yes.
guess then you can get
Yes.
deeper into the physical or the spiritual deficiencies. And
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
the best example.
Yes. So now why is he saying this? Why is he saying this? Because he wants to answer another question. That whatever is good. And then he wants to enter this discussion now. Good and bad, vice and virtue, he's saying these are all relative. Yes. But he's going to play around with this. He's going to play with our minds a bit for 4 sessions. Yeah.
so what about those embryos that they're born with a defect?
Yes. So in and of itself, it's perfect. It's complete. Look, when you say defect, it means you've compared it to something. It's only through comparing that terms such as incomplete arise. If there was no comparing, you would never say that. Yes. Yes, yes.
You mentioned about the perfection of perfection.
Yes.
Everything is trying to reach that perfection
Yes.
of perfection.
Yes. On a par with its nature, yes.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that they cannot be two.
Yet they can't be exactly like that.
So is this like what we say Allah or God
Yes, but we don't want to use
right now?
religious language yet. Yes. We want to prove it from an Aqli point of view for now. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
When it comes to genetic engineering, where the path is being manipulated,
Yes.
does it mean that the guidance is stopped because now we are manipulating it, we are interrupting the
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, that's a good point actually. Because once it's manipulated, for example, the seed can become, for example, an apple. with the manipulation. Yes, let me think about that a bit. Let me think about that. I'll start with this example. I don't want to rush and give an answer here. Yes, that's a good question, yes. Okay. This is a question? Yes. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sorry, yes.
Sheikh, when we say Yawm ad-Deen,
Yes.
what exactly is meant now by Yawm ad-Deen in context to
Yes.
this perfection?
Yes, so Yawm means manifesting. The reason we call a day Yawm, because it's manifesting that which we couldn't see at night. Yes. So even a television may be called Yawm, but the Arabs don't sanction that use. But theoretically, I mean. Whatever manifests something is called Yawm. So when it says Allah created things in 6 days, for example, it means in 6 stages of manifesting. Now here, deen will manifest. And how, for example, me, you, everyone, we journey towards our objective with our failings and our successes, that this will all, the reality of what we did will all manifest. It's all manifesting now. It's not as if Allah is not Malik right now. He's Maliki Yawmiddin right now too. But we don't see it. Yes. We're blind. Otherwise it's all happening right now.
As a common translation we hear is Day of Judgment usually.
Yes, translations are very difficult of the words of the Quran. We're a bit limited, yes. Okay, shall we? وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله